We'll have a step story in a minute. We got something else. Our long-awaited special visitor is here. I think at one point I said he was the 5th most famous person ever to set foot in North Dakota. We can argue that after this is over with. He is arguably the most celebrated, famous letter writer in the history of the world. And you know of his work, you all do. He wrote a letter to the church at Ephesus. He wrote one to the church at Corinth. He wrote one to the church at Galatia. And he has now written one to you. He's not written a letter in a very long time. And so please, let's have a big round of applause for St. Paul the Apostle.
Letter to the church called UCCGF. I haven't written a letter in a while, but then no one has done anything very interesting in a while. You've sold everything you have, sort of like what Jesus said. Very unusual, very interesting. You're now homeless. You've chosen to live your collective life at the margins. Your focus can now be outward. Now, I know that you guys are hardly selling all of your personal possessions and throwing everything in a big pile like the reports of the first century church. I always wondered myself which part of that was true and which part was legend. You should do something important, in part because they expect nothing noteworthy to ever come out of Grand Forks, North Dakota. You have everyone's attention now. National UCC staff people and seminary presidents have begun to spread the word about how this little congregation out in the wilderness put the work first, put the gospel first. You must become less like a church and more like a community of faith. You must become less like a church and more like a fellowship, more like an outreach, more like a mission project. Don't worry so much about growing in number. Worry more about growing in faith. Set the bar high. If you're truly faithful, you won't get all that big anyway. Most people talk about peace. Most people walk around the edges of justice. But most people won't finally commune with those they consider unclean. But you see, the trick is to recognize everyone as a son and a daughter of the living God. There are no unclean. All have been washed in the waters of salvation. You guys should just go ahead and do something important. You have nothing to lose, and you just might experience the salvation of your collective life. You just might show this community the way to heaven. You just might. My brothers and sisters, there is power in the gospel. Power way beyond your craziest notions. Let it loose. Have the courage to let it loose in your midst. Let the winds of the Spirit drive them out, that you may gather those at the margins and bring them into the fold where they may be healed. You have nothing left to lose. You have already sold everything you have. Grace and peace, the Apostle Paul. P.S. This is just the first chapter. Keep going. You're on the right track. Besides, if you keep pressing forward, you'll help write chapter 2. I'm leaving copies with your pastor so he can distribute them to all of you. Don't worry that there are no markings for chapter and verse. They only put that in later if it's a good letter. Thank you.
Thank you, St. Paul. He'd like to stay, but for reasons that are obvious, he can't. So he has left us. So, all right, well, we'll put these out on the table there. You can take one if you'd like. And if you want to come up with a step story now,